Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Private Equity Rundown. I am Bill, the company's expert. I am Bill so that you don't have to be. Welcome to my new experimental weekly live stream where we talk about private equity, which is the buying and selling of businesses, for those of you who don't know, and everything to do with corporate governance and corporations and how things operate at a high level. Yeah, this is episode 4. The title of this episode is The All-Seeing Board, How to Bypass the CEO and Get the Real Story. So this is a continuation of what we were talking about last time. We did an overview of corporations. We talked about their management structure and the ownership structure. We talked about the financials. And last week we talked about the control structure. So if you are a shareholder, that means you're entitled to two things, really. One is a share of the profit, which is the sort of financial side. And the other thing is the control side. You have a say in how the business is run. And that's what we were talking about last week. And we're talking about how things are set up. And we also talked about how the CEO reports to the board of directors, which are representatives of the shareholders, right? And we're talking mainly within the context of a private company. So we're going to expand on that this week, and we're going to talk about what happens if the CEO goes rogue, shall we say, does not do what they're supposed to do, and engages in a variety of practices where they keep the board in the dark as to maybe some things that are going on, and how that works, what are the types of things they can do, and how the shareholders can protect themselves against that. So this is an interactive live stream. So that means that there is a chat box. If you see my face, you can get in the chat and you can ask me questions. This is a little bit experimental, and unfortunately, I still haven't moved my schedule around to give myself more time to prepare for these. I literally am dealing with stuff, and then 2 minutes later, I'm on the air talking about this, which is something completely different. So I'm going to have to get that together in the future. As always, a special shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome. And my Patreons and my super thanks donors, and of course to you, my participants. Thank you for being here. I didn't know if anyone was interested at all in this topic. I'm interested in this topic. I think that, this is an interesting sort of area. A lot of the concepts apply to businesses at sort of higher levels beyond what I talk about on my Monday live stream, where we cover entrepreneurship and side hustles. So these are higher level concepts, but a lot of these ideas, I believe, can be brought downstream to people that are, they're either in the world of entrepreneurship and they could benefit from knowing some of these concepts. Also to people who are in conventional careers, they're working as employees, maybe getting into management, stuff like that. They can also benefit from knowing these concepts. So that's why I wanted to talk about them here. I find this stuff quite interesting. Yeah, there you go. So I have some notes here that I wrote for myself last week. Don't remember a thing about what I wrote down. So you'll have to forgive me today. I apologize if this is a bit scattered, but there's 8 people here. There's 11 people here. Thank you for joining me today. Okay, so something I did not cover last week, which was lobbying. You might have heard the term lobbying, and you might be wondering what the hell it means, okay? There's a lot of, what's an appropriate derogatory term? There's a lot of hoopla, a lot of hoity-toity kind of crap going on when it comes to business and corporations and how they're structured and all this kind of stuff. And this is an example. They use the term lobbying. And really, it's just a synonym for the word influencing. I mean, it's just the term influencing means lobbying. The only difference is that you're influencing in a more specific context. You're a shareholder trying to influence the management of a corporation. There you go. That's what lobbying is, right? There's no magic to it. That's just what it is. So if you are a shareholder, you are a part owner of a corporation. And like we've discussed, one of the things that comes with being a shareholder is having some say in how the business is run, right? And this can apply slightly differently if we're talking about like a Fortune 500 company that's publicly traded, where they have hundreds of thousands of shareholders, or we're talking about a private company that's much smaller, that's, maybe has something like 5 shareholders, right? Same concepts apply, but because it's on a completely different scale, the practices are completely different, right? So if you happen to be a shareholder and you did it because you became a shareholder because one way or another, it's an investment to you, you want to make money off it, you may end up having opinions on how that corporation is being run. Okay, maybe there's some issue that you feel strongly about, or maybe you're dissatisfied with the performance of the organization, or maybe you're exposed to their public statements or their PR messages, and you have developed some opinions on what you're hearing. Maybe in your opinion, they're going off the rails, and you would like to exert some measure of influence or control over it. So how do you do that? Well, lobbying is one way you could do it, right? That's where you try to influence the management of the corporation. And we talked last week how everything's set up, so I won't go over that. But what if you are trying to get your voice heard, okay? Last week we talked about there are regular board of directors meetings. This is where the directors, who are the representatives of the shareholders, meet, and they do it with the CEO, who is running the company for them on their behalf. And at these meetings, you get other people too. You get maybe the chief financial officer or something. You do get other individuals like people taking the minutes and stuff. But you also get external consultants or experts that kind of sit in and give their advice, usually on legal matters or especially accounting matters. And it's good to have independent sources there so that you're not just getting all your financial information from the chief financial officer, right? That's been an area where there's been some very high-profile scandals in the past, right? The CFO, the chief financial officer, assures you that everything is fine, right? And if that's your sole source of information, how would you know if they're up to some shenanigans, right? So this is one mechanism of overseeing, the organization. Typically, the name for all that stuff is called corporate governance. And officially, legally, it's sort of laid out in the 2 primary documents for a corporation. One is the Articles of Incorporation, and the other one is the corporate bylaws. These are the 2 sort of official documents that lay out what the corporation is and how it operates, right? These are official documents that are registered with the government. So if ever there's any disputes that turn nasty, maybe there's lawsuits threatened and stuff like this, you refer back to these. And this is where it specifies how things are to be done, like who can sit on the board and, conflicts of interest, and what's the mechanism to resolve disputes between directors or shareholders, like all this kind of stuff, right? Okay. So lobbying is basically a shareholder who's trying to make their voice heard. Okay. They're trying to influence the management of the company. And there's many ways they can do this. A lot of ways are pretty much summed up by just saying communication. Okay, so they can communicate with the CEO directly. They could send them an email. They could communicate with the board of directors directly by sending them an email, or doing it face to face, if as the circumstances permit. A popular way of doing this is submitting a document where you're almost like tabling a motion to be brought up at a board of directors meeting, saying, I would like this on the agenda. This is the issue. This is what our concerns are, and this is what we'd like to see happen, right? Making it easy for the directors to present this at a board meeting. And then, in addition to simply communicating what you want, it's a matter of exerting force, exerting influence. Now, we've covered previously how a shareholder can attempt to force the hand of a director so that they will argue for the shareholders' cause at a board meeting. Okay. They'll get the director to represent their concern. Okay. One way, the most obvious way, is obviously to threaten to sell your shares. That's one, saying you do this or I'm out. Right. Another way of doing it is that the board of directors are elected. Okay. They're elected as representatives of the shareholders. So the shareholders meet and they vote on who they want to represent them in the board. And this is obviously in the cases where there's too many shareholders to get around one table, practically, right? You know, if you've only got 5 shareholders and you don't really need to elect different directors, you can just all be directors, and there you go. It's simple. But if you've got like certainly more than about 30 shareholders, then you start electing directors to represent you so that you don't have to get 30 people around the table with the CEO. Okay, so you can threaten to sell your shares and say, like, you do this or I'm out. The other thing you can do is you can threaten to vote against the director if they don't represent you in the way that you would want. You can say, okay, well, the next time we vote on who's going to be our director, I'm not voting for you. And maybe I've elicited the support of a few fellow shareholders. We're united and we're all going to vote against you. We're not going to vote to have you as our director next time we vote on this if you don't push this issue, right? So you can exert force that way. And directors are paid. Directors are paid quite well usually for the role that they do. So they don't want to be voted off the board of directors if they can help it, right? So you can threaten that, selling your shares. You can threaten to vote out the director. Those are the 2 things you can do. The third thing you can do, at least that I know of, is become what recently has been termed as an activist shareholder or an activist. I don't think they use the term activist director, but I think they use the term activist shareholder, where beyond sort of communicating with the board and the management, like the CEO, you're going to go outside of it and do other things. Okay. So, maybe in big companies, one option is to take it public. If you have a concern, you're a shareholder, you publicize your views. And the idea being that will have some kind of influence over the company. If you publicize maybe a negative thing about the company, saying you have concerns that they're doing this because it's bad, that can influence not necessarily public opinion, but public opinion within their little circles, maybe to their customers or their partners or any other players in that industry. And that will look bad. That will influence the management to take your concerns seriously, because they don't want the negative fallout of you sort of bringing the stuff up in public, airing your dirty laundry in public, as it were. That's one thing that activist shareholders can do. Another thing is they can directly get involved in the business. So although they're not running the company, they can go to the other players in the industry and try to influence them. If the company's about to do a deal with another player, another entity, the activist shareholder could go to that entity. Maybe they have personal connections to that entity and start influencing things. They could maybe cause a deal to fall through or a proposal to be changed, this kind of thing. So there's all kinds of actions that shareholders can take to influence the management of a company. So if you are a shareholder, you have these at your disposal. Most people are not activist shareholders, though. So, I mean, that's the thing. Most people just rely on threatening to sell your shares, or vote the directors out. And everything that they do is basically a permutation of those 2 options. So there we go. I wanted to cover lobbying. And obviously, like this, this is all within the law, right? Like, you don't do bribes or anything like that, right? Like this is all within legal framework, right? That goes without saying, everything that I say on this channel, Okay, so let's talk about more directly the title of this, which is the all-seeing board, how to bypass the CEO and get the real story. Now, it's a known thing that the CEO of a company, okay, and I know what I'm talking about here, at least for smaller companies, it is possible to try and manipulate the board, okay? You report to the board, they are your bosses, and they rely for most of their information about what's going on with the company from you. You're the one that's sort of the pipeline. You're telling them what's going on. We're considering this deal. We've received a proposal to possibly partner with somebody, possibly do some kind of deal. We're pursuing this. This thing unfortunately fell through because of this problem, but we're addressing it in this way. However, we have an opportunity here, and we're also doing these other things internally. And this is our strategy externally. Like you feed all that information to the board so that they know what's going on, right? And they'll probably be questioning you about this when you meet with them regularly at board meetings. Incidentally, you do board meetings usually either every month, if you want to really be, if the board is really hands-on, or every quarter, if they're more hands-off. So you're going to be seeing them anyway. You're going to be talking to them. There's usually all kinds of communication going back and forth on a regular or semi-regular basis. So you're feeding them what's going on with the organization. Now, it's been known that CEOs, being in their position, they may want to control the narrative and not mention certain unfavorable things, or not voluntarily mention things that they don't want the board sort of chiming in on, right? If you tell your bosses about what's going on, they'll have an opinion. They'll try and, sometimes direct you to handle it a certain way. If you don't mention it, then they sort of leave you alone when as far as that issue is concerned, and you can handle it the way you want, right? So there's an incentive for the CEO or the management team not to communicate certain things with the board. This is well known. But the board represents or is the owners of the company. So this is an issue. So if you are a shareholder, you're one of the owners of the company, obviously you want to have some kind of mechanism in place to counter this, right? This is a major concern to you. You don't want to hire someone, put them in charge of your organization, and then just have them keep you in the dark, run things the way that you don't necessarily want them to, and you're ignorant of what's really going on, and you find out too late, right? So obviously there has to be some checks and balances on, the board seeing directly into an organization. Let's talk about that. Okay. So obviously we talked about regular board meetings. That's like the obvious thing, right? Now, in addition to that, by the way, the board, one of the things that they can do is they set up committees. Okay. And there's going to be some committees that exist sort of no matter what. In small companies, even though you're only just a handful of people, you still have like a couple of committees, right? In bigger corporations, especially publicly traded, you get lots of different committees, and they're all doing all kinds of different things. In a smaller company, which I'm more familiar with, you have at least three. Okay, so first of all, you have the compensation committee, and these committees are formed of a subset of the board members. Okay, so if let's say that there's 31, I think that's the number I used last time, 31 shareholders, and the 31 shareholders elect 3 directors to represent them. Okay, so the shareholders bring their concerns to the directors, okay, in shareholder meetings that are held on a regular basis, like town hall meetings, that's more the CEO, but other kind of things. And the directors then hold board meetings with the CEO, bring up their concerns, ask what's going on. They might direct the CEO to handle certain things different ways, okay, right? Now that board of, say, 3 directors, they will have a compensation committee, okay? So a compensation committee determines the compensation of the CEO and other key members of the management team, so the executives. And usually the way it works is the compensation committee is made up of a subset of the board of directors plus a couple of independent experts. Okay, so you would have maybe 2 directors sitting on the compensation committee, and they might bring in a sort of maybe like a tax expert, legal expert, and then they'll bring in an accountant. And these will be people that are external to the company. They're hired as consultants or contractors that sort of provide advice and recommendations and can oversee things. So they would discuss what's an appropriate compensation for the executives, and that determines how much they get paid. That would be the compensation committee. Another committee would be the audit committee, and this is what we're interested in because this is the committee that their job is to look at the company independent of what the CEO is doing and send in auditors to look at mainly financial statements, but other things too. They'll look at what are the processes that are happening in the company, what are the policies on paper, and they'll actually go into the company and verify that these policies are being followed. So things like saying that, like one person can't just make a sale, like initiate a transaction and push that all the way through the company by themselves. One of the standard things is that, you would have to have, certain things approved by someone else, right? You have to have oversight of different things, and different people at different levels have authority to approve various transactions of a certain value, but no more, right? If you're going to spend a lot of money, that has to go all the way up to the CEO, and several people have to sign off on it. If you're only going to spend a little bit amount of money, then maybe, the head of a department or something has to sign off on it. But other than that, it's fine. So the auditors will go into a company. These are usually independent, like accountant types. And, they're supposedly independent. They're hired from outside the company. They'll go in and they'll just verify everything from the accounting practices, the financial statements. They'll audit all the finances, all the way to the internal processes where, they follow transactions through the process and go and talk to a lot of employees and just verify that things are being done the way they're supposed to be done. I worked as an auditor, not a financial auditor, but I worked as an auditor in a past life where you did 3 things. You looked at documentation. You looked at, you did observations of what we see, how we see people handling things. And then you did interviews where you talk to people and ask them questions. When this happens, what do you do? Do you check with that person? How do you do this? And then you put all of that together and you analyze what's going on. So that mechanism feeds the board directly at the board meetings. So you don't have to rely on the CEO of the company to tell you what's going on. You've got your own sort of eyes and ears that go into the company to verify what's actually going on through the audit committee. That's one of the ways that they do this. There's also another standard committee called the risk management committee. It doesn't relate directly to what we're talking about here, but those are kind of the 3, at least in my experience, those are the 3 committees that the board will have. And it'll be all these committees are a subset of the board of directors, right? Other things, the board can arrange for site visits. Okay, that's one thing. They can go down themselves. The directors themselves can go down to the company. They can walk around. They can talk to people. They can observe what's going on, all this kind of thing. So that's always something that, you can do. And sometimes a director's duties will be officially sort of stated that you're going to be doing this on a regular basis. How you do it, you can specify that in your corporation bylaws and things like this, where you lay out your corporate governance practices and all this kind of thing. Okay, but that's another big one. The directors can go down there, and you can also arrange for, like, as I said, like external audits. You don't have to just necessarily rely on like quarterly audits as a standard thing. You can initiate external audits. It's almost like an investigation. It's like a sort of not a regular thing, but a one-time instance where you're going to investigate something very specific. Okay, so you can initiate that, and you can hire some new third-party independent auditor to come in and do an investigation. And some companies like to do that just almost randomly, like every once in a while, just to make sure that, if you just do a spot check, you don't uncover a whole bunch of weird shenanigans going on. So that's kind of that's probably a good overview today of how you do that stuff. These are some of the mechanisms available to you. Because if a CEO wanted to keep an issue quiet, they didn't want to bring up something, there's many, many ways of doing that. They can, first of all, they can just not bring it up. Okay, so the board is ignorant of a certain thing going on, and that way the CEO gets to handle it the way they want without any board sort of oversight. They can disclose it, but they disclose it conveniently too late to really take any meaningful action, right? So by the time it gets to the attention to the board, it's kind of over, and the board didn't have an opportunity to sort of guide how it was going to be handled, right? That's called agenda setting. Another sort of famous way of doing this is to distract the board by emphasizing another issue and making a big deal out of this issue, putting all this urgency around it, all this importance on it. And that way it distracts the board. It diverts all their attention to this issue, which is kind of a decoy. And simultaneously, unbeknownst to them, there's this other thing going on over here that just kind of slipped under the radar conveniently. And that was by design. The CEO orchestrated that, right? So this decoy occupies the entire board meeting. It occupies all the communication, right? And no one's really paying attention to other issues. No one's really checking up on other things, right? There's all kinds of standard sort of ways of doing that are well known. And so these mechanisms, as part of corporate governance, they're to make sure that the shareholders can see accurately what's going on in the business and can control it. They have the opportunity to control it in a timely manner, so that their interests are represented. It's not just the CEO running the show. Obviously, if the CEO doesn't do their job properly, or they withhold information from the board and it's a big deal, obviously they can get fired for that. I mean, their job description and their responsibilities and the expectations are all specified very clearly. So, you have this at your disposal. And unfortunately, it can even go beyond that to where people are bringing lawsuits against each other, right? Incidentally, that's another way of lobbying. If you're a shareholder trying to influence the company, namely the CEO and the executive management team, in addition to communicating and saying, I would like you to do this, in addition to threatening to sell your shares and walk, in addition to colluding with other shareholders and forming alliances and saying, we're going to vote you out as a director if you don't, argue our case at the next board meeting. In addition to the activist shareholder role, where you can go out and talk to the public and talk to other players in the industry and do things, you also can threaten litigation. That's the other thing at your disposal. I've never had to deal with that, touch wood, but that is technically something that shareholders can do. Usually you do that at higher levels, not at the levels that, of small private companies, but there you go. So hopefully that makes sense. That's kind of my my scattered sort of version of addressing, the all-seeing board, how to bypass the CEO and get the real story. These are some of the dimensions to that. And there you go. If you do have any questions on this, there is a live chat box where I can see your question or your comment. Get in there now if you have any reactions or questions or anything like that. I'll be here for another couple of minutes for sure. If I don't get any questions, and if I do, I'll stay and answer them. Ashley's here. Obviously, Ashley, we're talking about business, not how to get a job in this live stream. I will be back in half an hour, one way or another. I have another live stream in half an hour called Honest HR Nitrous, where we talk about job search, in particular the nitty-gritty reality of job search. And I'm happy to, I do nothing but answer questions. I'm happy to field any questions you might have. Let me know what you're struggling with. Let me know what you're wondering about or what's going on with you, and I'll do my best to help you out. But for right here, we're talking about, well, we didn't touch on private equity. We're sort of talking about corporations in general. And then after setting this up, maybe another one or two more of these kinds of topics, like setting up how a corporation works. Then we're going to get into the aspect of buying and selling companies, why you would do it, how you would do it. Because after all, that's what private equity is. It's the buying and selling of corporations under, a few specialized constraints. And we're going to get into that. And I think it's pretty exciting stuff. And just being aware of some of these concepts, as I said earlier, you can bring these down and apply them to your smaller scale thing you have going, whether it's a private business, like a side hustle or an entrepreneurial idea on the small scale, or you could even bring it within the context of your conventional career working as an employee. For example, a variation of private equity is something called a management buyout. That's where a bunch of managers get together and they propose a deal where they become the owners of the company that they manage, right? And this can really work out to their advantage, and it can be doable. It can be a way for people who have regular jobs working as employees. Maybe they move up into management, maybe in a smaller company, to jump into the world of business ownership. Okay, so now they're floating in corporate circles, and they're more of investors as opposed to simply employees. So I think that some of these ideas are really, really cool. That's why I wanted to just start talking about this. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions about business or private equity, so we're going to wrap this up. But I will be back next week with another topic. We're going to continue this. If you have any topic suggestions, please let me know. In the meantime, just because it's right on the screen there, if you are interested in learning business, check out that course. That's the best bang for the buck around. It's actually not technically a course, it's a program because it contains several courses because you're learning several subjects. You're learning everything that you would learn in a MBA program at a brick and mortar university. It's self-study, that's the catch, but it's a tiny fraction of the price. You're getting the same knowledge, and I provide videos to guide you through it. So check that out if that's anything you're interested in. I will be back next week with another edition of Private Equity Rundown, and I will be back in half an hour to do live streaming to talk about job search. Okay? Thanks, everyone. You guys are awesome. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.